Betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from the person you trusted most. And when that betrayal is revealed in front of your entire family, on the proudest day of your life, it's not just painful, it's humiliating. But what my husband didn't realize that day was that I already knew everything, and I had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. My name is Elena Ramirez. I'm 52 years old, and until last spring, I thought I knew exactly who I was: a devoted wife, a mother, a woman who had built her life around loyalty and sacrifice. I spent 3 decades standing behind my husband Daniel, supporting every career pivot, every big idea, every reckless gamble he swore would finally make him the man he wanted to be. We lived in Santa Fe, New Mexico, in a stucco house Daniel liked to call his castle, though I was the one who paid most of the bills that kept its roof from caving in. He had charisma, no doubt about it. Daniel could walk into a room of strangers and leave with friends, investors, or sometimes even admirers hanging on his every word. But when it came to follow through, responsibility, or plain honesty, he was always lacking. I excused it for years, told myself that's just who he was: dreamer, risk-taker, free spirit. My job was to keep us grounded. I worked as an accountant for a medical supply company. Steady hours, steady income, steady me. Meanwhile, Daniel went through 4 careers in 15 years. Real estate, car sales, photography, even a short-lived organic chili sauce business that left us with credit card debt and boxes of unsold jars stacked in the garage. Still, I stayed. Part of me loved the chaos, and another part, maybe the biggest, was too loyal, too stubborn to walk away. That loyalty reached its breaking point on the day of my son's graduation. It was a warm May afternoon, cloudless sky, the kind of day that makes the desert feel endless. We were at La Luna Bistro, an upscale place near the plaza. My son, Adrian, had just graduated from the University of New Mexico with a degree in engineering, the first in our family to earn one. We'd invited 40 people: cousins, co-workers, neighbors, even some of Daniel's business buddies. The air was buzzing with pride, laughter, the clinking of champagne flutes. And then Daniel stood up. He had a glass in his hand, ready to toast our son. But instead of praising Adrian's achievement, he cleared his throat and said, "I've made a decision. After 29 years of marriage, I'm choosing to start a new life without Elena." Silence. Forks froze midair. My son's smile collapsed into shock. I felt every pair of eyes, family, friends, even strangers from nearby tables, lock on to me, waiting for the explosion. But I didn't give them the drama they expected. No tears, no shouting. I simply smiled, set my glass down, and said, "Congratulations, Daniel, for finally being honest." The only sound was the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Then I reached into my purse, pulled out a navy blue envelope, and placed it on the table in front of him. "For you, something to open later." He frowned. His hand hesitated on the envelope like it was a live grenade. I turned to Adrian, kissed his cheek, and whispered, "This day is still about you. I am so proud of you." Then I stood, smoothed the skirt of my dress, and told the room, "Please, everyone, enjoy the meal. I wish you all a wonderful afternoon." And I walked out. The moment I pushed open the heavy restaurant doors, the New Mexico sun hit me like a wall. The heat stung my skin, but it felt cleansing. Behind me, muffled voices erupted, confusion spilling into whispers. I heard the doors slam open again, Daniel's voice rising, frantic and ugly. "Elena! What the hell did you just hand me? What did you do?" But I didn't stop walking. For the first time in years, I felt light, free, alive. That envelope Daniel clutched in his hand wasn't just paper. It was a bomb I'd been building for months, piece by piece, while he thought I was oblivious. You see, 3 months earlier, I'd noticed something odd. Small withdrawals from our joint account. $200 here, $350 there. Daniel had always been careless with money, but this was different. The transfers were consistent, deliberate. My gut told me something was wrong. I didn't confront him, not yet. Instead, I did what I've done my whole life. I investigated quietly, patiently, thoroughly. What I found nearly broke me. The account Daniel had been moving money into wasn't just for himself. It was connected to a woman, Lila Saunders, 27 years old, a yoga instructor who had once attended our holiday parties as a friend of a friend. I remembered her bright laugh, her 2 long hugs, the way Daniel's eyes lingered on her when he thought I wasn't looking. He wasn't just having an affair, he was funding a new life with her. Vacations in Taos, jewelry from boutiques downtown, a down payment for a loft apartment under her name. All while telling me we had to tighten our belts because retirement was coming. That was when something inside me snapped, not into despair, but into focus. Because Daniel had forgotten who I was. I wasn't just the loyal wife he could gaslight and discard. I was an accountant with 28 years of financial expertise. I understood money trails, contracts, and most importantly, our prenup. Yes, the prenup he had insisted upon all those years ago, back when my father helped me buy our first home. The one Daniel said would protect us both. He never thought I'd remember the fidelity clause buried inside it, but I remembered. And I made sure it would destroy him. That day at La Luna, when Daniel humiliated me in front of everyone, he thought he was in control. He thought he was announcing his grand exit, his liberation. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that I had already filed for divorce, already frozen certain accounts, already gathered proof of his betrayal. That envelope contained the evidence, the filings, and the legal reality that the life he thought he was running to was already gone. I didn't go back to the restaurant. I didn't need to. While Daniel sputtered and Lila preened in the corner, I got into my car, rolled down the windows, and drove back to our home, our house of 15 years. The one he had promised Lila in text messages I had read with my own eyes. When I walked inside, everything looked the same. The clay-colored walls, the iron cross above the fireplace, the photo albums stacked on the shelf. I knew nothing would ever be the same again. I climbed the stairs to the master bedroom, opened the closet, and found 3 suitcases already packed. His clothes, neatly folded, hidden behind my dresses. He had been planning to leave the very next day. Predictable, I thought. Always meticulous about appearances, reckless about everything else. My phone buzzed with messages from friends, from coworkers, from Adrian, even from Daniel's sister Marisol, who had flown in for the graduation. But I answered only one, my son's. "I'm okay," I texted. "This isn't your burden to carry. Today is about you. We'll talk tonight. I love you." Because if there was one person I refused to let Daniel ruin, it was Adrian. And so, the stage was set. Daniel thought he had blindsided me, but what he didn't realize was that I had been 3 moves ahead from the start. And now, the real revenge was only beginning. When Daniel finally stormed into the house later that afternoon, I was waiting. Not cowering, not crying, waiting. His face was flushed, hair disheveled, the envelope crumpled in his fist like he'd been strangling it the whole drive home. He slammed the door behind him so hard that one of the picture frames rattled against the wall. "What the hell is this, Elena?" he barked, shoving the papers in my face. "You served me divorce papers today? On Adrian's graduation day? Have you lost your mind?" I stayed seated on the couch, laptop still warm on my lap, calm, steady, everything he wasn't. "I thought it aligned nicely with your plans," I said evenly. "Oh, you wanted to start a new life. I'm just helping you transition." The confidence drained from his expression for a split second, then twisted into a sneer. "You don't have the right. The prenup expired years ago. Any lawyer will tell you that." I almost laughed. Actually, no. Section 14 clearly states the fidelity clause remains valid for the entire duration of the marriage. You'd know that if you'd bothered to read past the first page. The color drained from his face. For a moment, I saw fear there, sharp and unguarded. Then he masked it with rage. "You think you're clever, huh? Freezing accounts, blindsiding me like this?" His voice rose, echoing through the house. "You're vindictive. You've always been vindictive." I closed my laptop slowly and set it aside. "No, Daniel, I've always been patient. Too patient. And now, I'm done being your fool." That night, I stayed at Marisol's place. She greeted me at the door with a tight hug, her eyes wide with both worry and anger. "I knew he was up to something," she said. ushering me into her Adobe-style home filled with books and paintings. I confronted him last Christmas when I saw him with that girl. He swore it was nothing. I should have told you sooner. I gripped her hand. You told me when it mattered. For years, Marisol and I had shared an unspoken bond. Two women who would carry Daniel in different ways. She as his sister, me as his wife. That night, we sat in her kitchen with a bottle of Rioja and let years of truth spill out. She told me stories of Daniel lying as a teenager, sneaking money from their parents, weaving tales to get out of trouble. I told her about the sleepless nights I spent balancing our accounts, covering debts he never even remembered making. It was strange. In that moment, I realized how many of my memories with Daniel were actually just me, patching up the holes he left behind. The fallout began quickly. By the next morning, word had spread like wildfire. My phone lit up with texts, some sympathetic, some nosy, but one stood out. Adrian said, "Mom, Dad's telling everyone you've gone crazy. He says you planned this to embarrass him." Of course, Daniel's favorite trick, rewrite the story so he's the victim. When Adrian finally came over that evening, still in his graduation gown because he hadn't gone home, his face was pale and tight. He dropped into the couch beside me and whispered, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I cupped his face like I used to when he was little. "Because I wanted you to have your moment. Your graduation was yours, not his to ruin, not mine to overshadow." Tears filled his eyes. Well, he ruined it anyway. I hugged him, feeling his shoulders tremble. "No, mijo, he ruined himself. And you're still going to shine brighter than he ever could." That night, Adrian heard the full story. The affair, the money transfers, the prenup. He listened in silence, jaw clenched, eyes darkening with each detail. When I finished, he stood abruptly. "I can't even look at him," he said, voice shaking. "Why, all the boxes are written, but maybe the word made by it is not easy for someone to be self. He had me working 2 jobs for textbooks while he was taking her on vacations?" "Yes," I said quietly, "but don't carry his shame on your back. That's his burden." 2 days later, the storm truly hit. Daniel showed up at Marisol's house with Lila. He banged on the door until Marisol opened it, arms crossed, her face carved from stone. Behind him stood Lila, arms folded tightly, shifting from foot to foot like she'd rather be anywhere else. "Elena, this is insane," Daniel said, barging past his sister into the living room. "Unfreeze the accounts. We can talk this out like adults." I didn't move from my seat. "The accounts stay frozen until the hearing. That's in 3 days. 3 days?" He practically choked on the words. "What am I supposed to do until then?" "You have your personal account," I reminded him. "The one you've been funneling money into for over a year." Leela's head snapped toward him. "What personal account?" The tension in the room shifted instantly. I almost pitied him. Almost. "That's not— She's twisting things," Daniel sputtered, ignoring her question. But I could see the cracks forming between them. Leela wasn't just uncomfortable anymore. She was suspicious. And Daniel? He looked cornered for the first time in his life. "Get out," Marisol finally said, voice like steel. "You've done enough damage for one day." Daniel's face flushed crimson. "This isn't over, Elena. You'll regret this." I met his gaze steadily. "The only thing I regret is not seeing you clearly sooner." The days that followed were brutal. Not because I doubted myself, but because the weight of years pressed down on me. Sleepless nights, memories of anniversaries, vacations, family dinners, all tainted now by the knowledge that he had been preparing to throw it all away for someone half my age who had no idea who he really was. And yet, beneath the pain, there was a growing ember of strength. Every time my phone buzzed with another attempt at manipulation, Daniel begging, Daniel raging, Daniel threatening, I felt myself harden. Every time Lila's name appeared in the gossip chain, whispered by friends who suddenly remembered things they'd noticed but never told me, I grew more resolved. Daniel thought this was a game of appearances. He thought if he controlled the narrative, he could still win. What he didn't realize was that this wasn't about appearances anymore. This was about survival, and I was done surviving quietly. The preliminary hearing came faster than I expected. A small courtroom, rain tapping against the windows, the air heavy with tension. Daniel sat at one table with a lawyer who looked barely out of law school, a corporate associate with slicked hair and nervous eyes. I sat at the other with Gabriela Ruiz, a seasoned family attorney who had been my quiet partner in this plan for months. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman with no patience for theatricics, flipped through the prenup and the evidence we had compiled. Transfers, receipts, even printed screenshots of Daniel's text to Leela. "This agreement is valid," the judge said finally, peering over her glasses at Daniel's lawyer. "But the fidelity clause is explicit, and these fund transfers appear to violate financial disclosure requirements. I am maintaining the freeze on joint accounts until full discovery." Daniel slammed his palm on the table. "This is outrageous." The judge fixed him with a stare so cold I almost smiled. "What's outrageous, Mr. Ramirez, is entering a courtroom without reading the agreement you signed. We reconvene in 30 days for the full hearing." And just like that, it was done. As we left the courthouse, Daniel caught up to me in the hallway. His face was pale now, sweat clinging to his temples. "Elena, please," he said, voice suddenly soft. 29 years together has to count for something. Can't we fix this?" I stopped, turned, and looked him straight in the eyes. "It counted," I said, "until you decided it didn't." Then I walked away, my heels clicking against the marble floor, each step heavier with power than I'd ever felt before. But this was only the beginning, the real unraveling of Daniel's life. The part where he'd feel every ounce of betrayal he had inflicted on me was still to come, and I was going to make sure of it. In the days after the preliminary hearing, I noticed a shift, not just in Daniel, but in myself. For the first time in years, I was no longer reacting to his chaos. I was directing it. And the more control I reclaimed, the clearer my mind became. I woke early each morning, brewed my coffee, and spread documents across Marisol's kitchen table. Bank statements, property records, emails I had carefully archived. While Daniel scrambled to put out fires, I was laying bricks on the path toward my future. It was almost exhilarating. Meanwhile, Daniel was unraveling. Friends who once admired his charm now avoided his calls. His so-called business partners wanted nothing to do with a man whose accounts were frozen. And Lila? Well, cracks had turned into canyons. I heard through the grapevine, Santa Fe is small, after all, that she'd started complaining about the lies, about the money that suddenly wasn't flowing, about how she hadn't signed up for a middle-aged man drowning in legal trouble. I wasn't surprised. Men like Daniel lived on illusions, and the second the mirage faded, so did the admiration. But I didn't just want him exposed. I wanted him cornered. I wanted him to feel the very helplessness he had spent decades shielding himself from. One evening, Adrian came over, his face tight with anger. "Gad showed up at my apartment," he said, pacing my sister-in-law's living room. "He tried to make me take his side, said you manipulated him, that you're trying to destroy his life." I sat back in my chair. "And what did you say?" Adrian stopped pacing. His hands balled into fists. "I told him he already destroyed his life, but you're just cleaning up the mess." Pride swelled in my chest, but I kept my tone calm. "I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this, mijo." He shook his head. "I'm not in the middle. I'm with you." Those words gave me the strength I didn't realize I'd been craving. Because Daniel could spin lies all day long, but our son had seen the truth for himself. And with that, I moved from defense to offense. The first step was money. Over the years, I had watched Daniel play fast and loose with finances, trusting me to quietly pick up the pieces. This time, I turned his recklessness into evidence. Every transfer he thought was hidden, every extravagant purchase under Lila's name, I documented it all. My attorney, Gabriela, coached me. "Keep everything in order. We'll build the picture piece by piece. By the time the full hearing comes, the judge won't just see betrayal, she'll see fraud." And she was right. The second step was narrative. Daniel loved to perform, to manipulate perception. But I knew how fragile his image really was. So while he tried to convince our circle of friends that I was vindictive and unstable, I stayed silent, dignified. I let the facts speak for me, and they did. Neighbors who once waved at him with admiration now crossed the street. Colleagues who once bragged about knowing him began to whisper. Even his own sister, his last lifeline, looked him in the eye one afternoon and said, "You've humiliated yourself, Daniel. Elena didn't do this. You did." It wasn't just satisfying. It was justice, slow and suffocating. The third step was personal. Because while Daniel's world crumbled, I started building mine. I'd always dreamed of opening a consultancy, a financial advisory service specifically for women. For years, Daniel had dismissed it as a cute hobby idea. But now it was my weapon. I rented a small office downtown, just 2 rooms above a bakery. The smell of fresh bread filled the hallway every morning as I sat at my desk, hung degrees on the wall, and created a sign. Ramirez Financial Transitions, helping women secure their futures. My first clients were 2 women referred by Gabriella Dash, both navigating divorces of their own. Sitting across from them, explaining budgets and asset protections, I realized something life-changing. I wasn't just helping them, I was reclaiming myself. Daniel had tried to define me as the caretaker, the supporter, the woman in his shadow. But now, I was stepping into the light. But make no mistake, I wasn't letting go of revenge. 'Cause the closer the full hearing drew, the more desperate Daniel became. He showed up one night at Marisol's again, this time alone, eyes bloodshot, reeking of tequila. "Elena," he slurred, "we can fix this. I made a mistake, but you're cruel. You want to watch me burn." I looked him dead in the eye. "I don't want to watch you burn, Daniel. I want you to feel what I felt. Betrayed, powerless, disposable." His face twisted, but for once, he didn't have a comeback. A week later, Leela finally left him. It happened fast. One moment she was living in his fantasy apartment, the next she was gone, moving her things out while he was at a, quote, network event, end quote. Word spread that she had found someone else, a wealthy developer in Albuquerque. When I heard, I didn't even smile. Not because I wasn't satisfied, but because it was inevitable. Lila had never loved him. She loved the idea of him, the illusion he constructed. And when that illusion collapsed, she simply walked away. Daniel, however, couldn't. He was trapped in the rubble, and I was still holding the match. As the final hearing approached, Gabriella and I fine-tuned our case. We had records of every dollar he siphoned. We had texts and emails showing intent to abandon me for Leela. We had the prenup, ironclad and unforgiving. But I wanted one more layer, one more nail in his coffin. So I went through my files again, carefully, methodically. That's when I found it, a series of voice recordings. Not of intimate moments, never that. I wasn't cruel, but of conversations where Daniel openly plotted. One in particular sent chills down my spine. His voice, smug and dismissive. "After Adrian's graduation, I'll announce it. Public setting is better. Elena won't make a scene in front of everyone. She trusts me too much. That's her weakness." I listened 3 times, memorizing every inflection. And then I tucked it neatly into my evidence folder. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. Not because of nerves, those were gone, but because of anticipation. I thought about the girl I'd been at 23, marrying a man who promised the world. The woman at 38, exhausted but loyal, bailing him out of failed ventures. The wife at 52, blindsided at her son's graduation. And I thought about the woman I had become in just 3 months. Tomorrow wasn't just about punishing Daniel. It was about closing a chapter, locking the door, and throwing away the key. The morning of the hearing, I stood in front of the courthouse steps, the desert sun rising behind me. Marisol was by my side. Adrian, too, his hand steady on my shoulder. "Mom," he said, voice low but firm, "whatever happens in there, I'm proud of you." I looked at him, my son, the man he had become, despite his father's failures, and I felt tears sting my eyes. Not of sadness, of strength. "Let's finish this," I whispered. And with that, I walked inside. The courtroom was small, almost intimate, but the air inside felt electric with tension. Rows of wooden benches lined the walls, filled with curious onlookers, and a handful of familiar faces. Neighbors, distant cousins, even one of Daniel's old business partners, who seemed more interested in gossip than loyalty. Daniel sat at his table, jaw clenched, his once perfect hair now streaked with gray and disarray. Beside him was a new lawyer, slightly older than the first but still unprepared for the avalanche of evidence we were about to unleash. I sat across from him with Gabriella at my side, calm, composed. My folders stacked neatly, my hands folded in my lap. The judge entered, sharp-eyed and unsmiling, and the proceedings began. Gabriella stood first. Your Honor, we are here to enforce the prenuptial agreement signed by Mr. and Mrs. Ramirez, as well as to present evidence of infidelity and financial misconduct. Daniel's lawyer objected immediately, claiming the prenup was outdated and unfair, but the judge raised a hand, silencing him. I've reviewed the documents. Let's see the evidence, she said. And then Gabriella began. Piece by piece, she laid it all out. The bank statements, the wire transfers, the jewelry receipts, the apartment lease. Each page stacked higher on the judge's bench, each fact cutting deeper into Daniel's carefully constructed facade. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, tugging at his collar. Then came the voice recording. Gabriella pressed play, and Daniel's own voice filled the silent courtroom. After Adrian's graduation, I'll announce it. Public setting is better. Elena won't make a scene in front of everyone. She trusts me too much. That's her weakness. Gasps rippled through the room. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Daniel went pale. That was taken out of context, he stammered. But the damage was done. His arrogance, his cruelty, his betrayal, exposed in his own words. When it was Daniel's turn, he tried everything. First anger, slamming his palm against the table as he insisted I was vindictive. Then pity, his voice trembling as he spoke of nearly 3 decades together. Finally, desperation, claiming I was leaving him with nothing. The judge listened patiently, but her expression never softened. At last, she delivered her ruling. The prenuptial agreement is valid and enforceable. Given the evidence of infidelity, Mrs. Ramirez will retain the family home, her retirement accounts, and 70% of joint assets. Mr. Ramirez will retain his personal property and remaining personal accounts. She paused, fixing Daniel with a stare that could cut glass. This court does not look kindly on deception. Consider yourself fortunate, Mr. Ramirez, that this matter is confined to divorce court and not criminal proceedings. Her gavel struck, and just like that, it was over. The moment we stepped out of the courthouse, reporters swarmed. I said nothing, just walked past them, chin lifted, the desert sun warming my face. Behind me, Daniel stood frozen on the courthouse steps, shoulders slumped, his lawyer whispering frantically in his ear. The man who once prided himself on being untouchable now looked small, and for the first time in years, I felt tall. But the fallout was only beginning. Within weeks, Daniel's life collapsed in on itself. Leela was gone for good, already flaunting her new relationship with the developer in Albuquerque. Daniel's business, propped up for years by my financial safety nets, crumbled without my support. Predators called, deals fell through. He was forced to sell his car and move into a modest apartment across town. Word spread quickly. Friends distanced themselves. The same people who once laughed at his jokes now whispered behind his back. Even his own family avoided him. Marisol told me she hadn't returned a single one of his calls. Meanwhile, my life was blooming. My consultancy grew faster than I had dared imagine. By the end of the summer, I had a roster of clients, women navigating divorces, widows unsure of their finances, professionals planning for independence. Each session reminded me of my own journey, and each time I helped someone, I felt stronger, freer. Adrian visited often, calling me his hero. He said seeing me rebuild gave him courage to chase opportunities without fear. And Marisol? She became my closest ally, not just family, but sister in every sense that mattered. One evening, 6 months after the hearing, I was closing up my office when my phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then answered. Elena? The voice was hoarse, weak. Daniel. I just wanted to say. He paused, as if the words weighed too much. I made a terrible mistake. I lost everything, and I know I can't undo it, but I hope someday you'll forgive me. For a moment, I said nothing. I thought of the girl I had been, the woman who bent over backward to forgive him time and time again. But that woman no longer existed. No, Daniel, I said gently, firmly. That door is closed. And I hung up. The final twist came almost poetically. The very prenup Daniel had insisted upon, the one he claimed would protect him, was the instrument of his downfall. His arrogance had written his own punishment long before he betrayed me. And me? I found not just revenge, but renewal. I stood taller. I walked freer. I built something with my own hands, something lasting, something powerful. Because in the end, revenge wasn't just about watching him fall. It was about reclaiming myself. 6 months later, on a quiet autumn evening, I sat on my porch, watching the sun dip behind the desert hills. Adrian sat beside me, Marisol across from us, a bottle of wine open on the table. To new beginnings, Marisol said, raising her glass. I clinked mine against hers. To freedom, Adrian smiled. And to Mom, who proved that the best revenge isn't just justice, it's living better without the person who tried to break you. And I looked out at the horizon, the last rays of sunlight painting the sky gold. And for the first time in decades, I wasn't looking back, only forward. Betrayal leaves scars, but scars don't just mark pain, they mark survival. Daniel thought he could humiliate me, discard me, start fresh without consequence. But he underestimated me. He forgot that the woman he tried to control was the same woman who had kept him afloat all along. And when I finally turned that strength on him, it wasn't just revenge, it was liberation. I lost a husband, but I gained myself. And in the end, that was the sweetest justice of all. If you felt this story hit deep, give it a like. It helps more people find it. Subscribe if you want more true stories of betrayal, justice, and the kind of revenge that leaves you breathless. And tell me in the comments, what was the moment you realized you were stronger without the person who betrayed you?